The important thing to understand about how we define unemployment is who's included in the unemployment rate and who's not included, because we hear these unemployment numbers get released in the news. People are talking about unemployment a lot, but it's important to understand what that means and what it doesn't mean. I'm going to go through a couple important takeaways from the video that you just watched about defining unemployment, and then we'll do a calculation example. First, we start by considering the adult civilian non-institutionalized population. The adult civilian non-institutionalized population excludes people who are children, and that means actually by definition anyone who is under the age of 16 is excluded, but anyone over 16 is included in the adult non-institutionalized population, given that they're a civilian, right? So it excludes active duty military personnel, and it also excludes people living in institutions. And when we say institutions, that could mean somebody who's in jail. It could mean someone who's in a nursing home, drug treatment facility, something like that. These people cannot hold regular employment and therefore are not included in this population of people who are eligible to be working. But everybody else, regardless of how old they are or their situation, is going to be included in the adult civilian non-institutionalized population. Once we have our adult civilian non-institutionalized population, we can break that down into people who are in the labor force and people who are out of the labor force. All the people who are eligible for work, who would like to be working and who would not like to be working. Then from our labor force, we can break that down into two categories of people who are employed or people who are unemployed. What gets reported in the news is usually the unemployment rate. And the unemployment rate is a ratio of the number of people who are unemployed divided by the number of people who are in the labor force. A little bit less commonly cited in the news, but still important for understanding what's going on in the economy, is a labor force participation rate. That's here. That's the labor force participation rate, which is a kind of a wordy phrase. We usually abbreviate that LFPR. And that's the number of people in the labor force divided by the adult civilian non-institutionalized population. So I've got some numbers in this table to help us think about what that looks like in reality. And these are the actual employment numbers from March 2020. If you looked up this information in BLS, all of the numbers would be filled into this table. But I've left some of them out so that you can start to understand the relationship between these different variables. So we've got our adult civilian non-institutionalized population, and then I've also given you the number of people who were employed and the number of people who are unemployed. So to get the civilian labor force, we would add together the number of people who are employed and the number of people who are unemployed. And these numbers are all in thousands, right? So this is actually 155 million plus 7 million. And that's going to be 162,912. The labor force is made up of everyone who is employed, who is actively working. And to be employed, you only need to be working any number of hours. I mean, the question in the survey is actually, have you done anything for pay or profit in the last week? So anyone who mows a lawn and gets 20 bucks, they're going to be counted as employed. All right. And then to be unemployed, you have to not be employed. So you have no work for pay or profit. You also have to be actively looking for work and have been able to start a job. How many people are not in the labor force? Well, we can take then the difference between the adult civilian non-institutionalized population and our labor force, and that will tell me the answer. And that's going to be 96 million people. Yeah, so we filled out our table. Let's go ahead and calculate the unemployment rate and the labor force participation rate for last month. So the labor force participation rate is going to be the number of people in the labor force divided by the number of people who could be in the labor force, the adult, civilian, non-institutionalized population. That's going to give me 62.7%. And then the unemployment rate will be the number of people who are unemployed divided by the number of people in the labor force. So 7140 divided by 162,912. And that gives me 0.044 or 4.4%.